what Trump hasn't, I think, fully realised is that you actually need allies. And when you ask them for help, they're much less likely to provide it if they've been badly treated. And so he's then left with this possibly rather pathetic stunt of sending his top spook to Moscow to see if the Russians will help.
A US military plane landed in Moscow yesterday, shortly before a motorcade with American diplomatic plates was seen driving through the city. Neither the Russians nor the Americans have confirmed who was on board, but the plane is reported to have been carrying the head of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. There has been speculation that the visit could have been to negotiate the release of Americans held in Russian prisons or to end strikes on energy infrastructure in the Ukraine war. But the former head of the CIA, John Brennan, told Times Radio Breakfast he thought it might relate to the war with Iran.
John Ratcliffe is somebody who's very loyal to Donald Trump. He's close to Donald Trump. He's been involved in a lot of the discussions and meetings related to Iran. So I think it carries a fair amount of gravitas by bringing the CIA director there. And again, it may be that there's going to be some type of discussion about a possible trade-off between, seeking Russian concessions on Iran and, unfortunately, maybe giving up something from the United States side on Ukraine, which is very troubling and worrying.
Well, that was the former CIA Director John Brennan speaking to Times Radio Breakfast. I'm joined now by the Times columnist and Russia expert Edward Lucas. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
Good morning. Thanks. So, look, what do you make of what John Brennan says there? Do you think this could involve the US making concessions on Ukraine in return for getting what it wants with regard to Iran?
That's always been the nightmare, that the United States, or at least the Trump administration, would decide to try and use Ukraine as a bargaining counter for something else, whether it was a reset with Russia or, in this case, a Russian help on the disastrous Gulf War. I think what's changed is that the Ukrainians are no longer dependent on the Americans the way they were. There's some things in America that really matter, like targeting information and sort of very high-end intelligence. But as nobody trusts the Trump administration, and they haven't done since he came in, there have been a lot of workarounds, and the Europeans are doing a lot more. So I am sad if that's what America's trying to do. I'm not particularly worried that it's going to work.
I mean, there's a certain irony there from the American perspective that the Americans and, the Trump administration has spent so long complaining about the role it was expected to shoulder in Ukraine that now other peoples are taking up the burden, which means as a direct result, its own influence has lessened.
Yes, and as so often with the Trump administration, they've been burning the furniture to keep warm, and then they worry they don't have anywhere to sit. And they are they've burnt their relationship with Canada, they've burnt their relationship with South Korea, they've burnt their relationship with Europe, they've burnt their relationship with Ukraine, they've burnt their relationship with the Gulf allies. The list goes on. And what Trump hasn't, I think, fully realised is that you actually need allies. And when you ask them for help, they're much less likely to provide it if they've been badly treated. And so he's then left with this possibly rather pathetic stunt of sending his top spook to Moscow to see if the Russians will help.
Well, look, Trump does have his economic D-Day plan against Iran, which basically involves, the cooperation of people who are currently still trading and dealing with Iran. Presumably, if this was linking Ukraine and Iran, that would be at the heart of it, a Russian cooperation on the economic D-Day plan.
I think the D-Day plan is a movie that we've seen already, and you and I probably both remember the era of maximum pressure on Iran. And the problem, which was the previous sort of idea of putting a very tight sanctions squeeze on. And the problem is the Chinese won't play, and the Chinese are quite capable of keeping Iran going. And so as the Trump administration has been faced down by China, they talked very tough and then realized that they were in no position to confront China economically. I think this D-Day, economic D-Day stuff is basically performative, and it's a chance to get even crosser with their allies. But I don't think it's going to bring the mullah's regime in Tehran to its knees. Hope I'm wrong, but I don't see it.
How common is it for the director of the CIA to speak directly to the Russians like this? Has it happened before?
Well, certainly it's happened before. Speaking over the phone is much more common than actually going all the way there. The last it was a big example was when the CIA director Burns went to Moscow just before the Ukraine war to say to the Russians, we see you're planning a war in Ukraine, don't do it. It will be disastrous, both for our relations and indeed for you. And that message was not accepted, with the result that 4.5 years later, we are in this terrible mess. Now, it's possible that Nick Burns is going to talk about peace in Ukraine or try and push some sort of deal. And as the Times reported this morning, there are some things going on behind the scenes with the Vatican, and the very impressive Vatican Foreign Minister, Paul Gallagher, has been talking to both sides. And it's possible we might see some sort of deal, like not hitting each other's grain supplies, because the squeeze on world grain supplies is hurting everybody. And Ukraine exports a lot, Russia exports a lot. It could be some sort of deal not to hit each other's energy infrastructure as the winter gets nearer. But I don't see any willingness on the Russian side at the moment to do that. Putin's taking a periscopes down and full speed ahead approach to the war, and still believes that he can that he can win. The West will get tired and Ukraine will break, and we have to prove him wrong.
Do we think this meeting was supposed to be a secret? It's obviously not much of a secret if they're in a motorcade with American diplomatic plates on it. But what does it say that it was leaked to the press?
I'm not sure it was exactly leaked to the press. I think that the people who spend their days, it's not exactly plane spotting, but looking at the international aviation websites that show movements, noticed an American military plane was heading to Moscow and stopping off in Riga. And then we start trying to draw conclusions from that. And we also draw conclusions from the, it was reported by CBS, so they clearly got some kind of steer. And that was, I thought, quite interesting that the Russians didn't have the news first. And I think if they were trying to be nice to the Russians, and it was a sort of attempt to have a real rapprochement, you'd probably have slightly different news management, and probably also the CIA director Radcliffe would spend the night in Moscow, and this kind of very brusque in and out, I think he had 4 hours on the ground, is a sign of it's probably a sort of rather punchy message being delivered rather than a friendly one. And it's also interesting he didn't get to meet Putin, as far as we can see. In fact, we've been told Putin didn't meet him, so that wasn't any great sort of warmth on the Russian side either. So I suspect we may know in 25 years when the files are declassified, we may know, or in 25 minutes when someone leaks it, somewhere in between then and now.
Well, I guess that's my final question, is that what's the point of this kind of meeting in purpose? Is it because it just makes more of an impact, or is it because you can say things that are not otherwise recorded? You can speak bluntly because you're not on tape, you're not on camera.
Well, if only that were true. We've also seen American envoys, the ghastly Steve Witkoff, known as Witless Witkoff by those in the know, and the similarly unimpressive Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, going to Moscow to talk sort of in friendly ways to Putin about how wonderful it'd be if we could all get along. And also, I think the chair of the American Fine Arts Committee, who is a sort of great pro-Russian aesthete and has built a Russian dacha in his ranch in Texas, he went to one of Putin's big showcase events as the sort of leading American person there. And these people go and they talk nonsense. They don't know anything about Russia. They don't speak Russian. They don't have anyone with them who speaks Russian. And it's embarrassing for us, and I think quite fun for the Russians. It doesn't actually change anything, but it just, apart from further chipping away America's already very dented and tattered image as the sort of world security hegemon, which is an era we now remember only dimly, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Edward Lucas, Times columnist and Russia expert.